It could be good or bad. I don't.
Okay, so let's see. Oh, we are recording already.
Yes, I haven't turned it on.
So I'm gonna turn this over. Please introduce yourself.
Very good. Okay. So I want to welcome everybody today. My name is Ken Cross, and I'm with the Renaissance Society of Sacramento, and actually been with the organization for about 8 years, and started out as a student, and then I became a seminar leader the second semester. So this is my 8th year, it'll be my 15th semester teaching. And I've been on the board of directors for 5 years. I was president for 2 years. So I'm going to talk to you two things today about the Renaissance Society, about maybe 10-15 minutes, 15 minutes max. And then I'll talk to you about the Camino de Santiago Frances that I walked this summer. So first question I guess I'd ask you is, how many of you have heard of the Renaissance Society? Okay. All right. So I'm going to cover this very briefly and tell you a little bit today about the Renaissance Society, the benefits of membership, and how to participate, and then take some questions from you. So the Renaissance Society is what we call a lifelong learning organization. Today there are over 400 of these in the U.S. The first one we know of started back in the 1962 timeframe in New York City, called the New Schools Institute for Retired Professionals, or the ERP. Which you can see there was made up of a lot of retired school teachers. They reminded me of my parents and my aunts and my uncles, who were all teachers. So that's them on the left. On the right is what it looks like here with the last few years. So one of the more, about 30% of the lifelong learning organizations are called OLLIs, Lifelong Learning Institutes, after a guy named Osher. Osher Lifelong Learning Organizations. And they actually put out a directory here. They've updated in September 2021. And in that, you can go online and get this thing. It actually shows you all the ones by state across the United States. So if somebody asked me, I'm in Texas, do you have any lifelong organizations down here? I say, here's the directory. Take a look.
There are some in Davis. UCD has an OLLI program.
Yeah, have an OLLI at UC Davis, one at Sierra College, one at UOP down south. There are about 39 of these lifelong learning organizations in California. Of those, probably 2/3 are independents, not OLLIs. So we're sponsored or hosted by Sacramento State. We've been hosted since 1986. Originally, Don Girth, who was the president at the time, started this. Today, this will be our 4th president, and Dr. Luke Walker, or Luke Wood, just became the new president here in July. And he's the 13th CSUS president. We fall under the Diane Heisen with which many of you probably know, with Department of Social Science and Interdisciplinary Studies. So they're kind of our liaison on campus. And as I mentioned, we were founded in 1986. It's a peer-to-peer organization, which means our students take classes and teach classes. We don't pay for any structures. We do have people, retired teachers and professors, emeritus, but it's all peer-to-peer. And it's all about lifelong learning, socializing, service, and fun. And we have last year we had over 1,700 members, about 70% women, about 30% men. And this was one of our founders, Robert Heilman, who was a professor of social work. And his quote there, it looks a little like Abe Lincoln, doesn't he? It said, but he was very passionate about this, and back in the 70s and 80s, and was instrumental in starting the program initially. Actually went to his memorial service here a few years ago. He passed away at age 90, and it was a real force of nature. So membership's open to all adults. There's no age limits on this. I would say our members generally range from the 50s to up in the 80s, 90s. Our oldest member is 103 years old. So we have people from all ages that participate in our program, and there's no age limit or age requirement on our programs. You're just going to have to, it's about learning off of the fun of it, right? There's no grades, no attendance checked, and any of those kind of things. It's just learning because you like to learn. And opportunity for everybody to participate. We have people from all walks of life, all kinds of careers and occupations. And most of our seminar leaders are not credentialed teachers. I was not a credentialed teacher. I taught in corporate training for about 3 years as director of training for a financial services company, facilitated training throughout my careers. But it's basically people who either know a lot about a subject or want to know more about a subject that teach our classes. And one of my big good friends, we get together every month for lunch out in the park, Mike Agron, who was actually in the tech industry over 30 years. And he says here, I would have paid them to have allowed me to teach this course. And so what he has is a great course on music. He shows clips from not only Frank Sinatra, but all kinds of popular music from the 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And it tells you the history about it, and very, very knowledgeable and very, very interesting. So you hear the history of music. We're very much into philanthropy. And one of the things we've done for about the last 6 going on 7 years, we've supported the ASI food pantry at Sac State. We've given well over $100,000 to the food pantry, all voluntary donation from our members. Hunger and food insecurity is a huge problem, not just at Sac State, throughout the CSU system across the United States. So it's hard to study and to get a degree if your stomach's growling, right? So it doesn't matter what age you are.
So who coordinates the collection of your money?
Our members do. A lot of our seminar leaders, what they'll do is they have classes on campus. They'll pass a physical envelope around in the classrooms, collect money, checks or cash. We turn it in. We also, people donate online or send in checks to the food pantry. So very, very proud of that. Our members are very, they can relate to where many of our members put themselves through college, so they can really relate to what it's like to go to college. And we actually participated in a food drive here in 2021, where we drove through and either people dropped off checks or baskets of food. Last year, we hit an all-time, the figure I heard the other day was we donated voluntary donations to our members over $44,000 to the food pantry. So we won this Golden Plate Award the last 2 years. It's in our office, hanging on the walls. One of the other things we're proud of is we've had scholarships for students. We award 7 of those a year, $3,000 each, total of $21,000. Started by the 2 men you see in the picture there. One is Doug Fulton, and the other is Lou Weintraub, who both passed now, but they started this back in 1993. We each spring award these scholarships. We've now awarded 121 scholarships, a total of $269,000. Once again, all voluntary, those donations, scholarships. And it's based on need. And so it's a really very compelling stories. If you go on our websites, we have the stories of these students and what the scholarships mean with them. So they're across all different kind of scholastic study areas on the campus. One of the things we do is we volunteer on campus. Very proud of that. We work with the gerontology department. I actually do a class here with Linda, with one of the Gero programs. We do mentoring with the students, where we go and we sit down with them one-on-one. They're in Gero 121. They have 4 or 5 meetings with their members, ask them about the arc of their life, what's going on in their life. I say it's like cheap therapy. This semester, I started in the very beginning. This will be my 16th semester doing it. One of the high points of my semester, because I meet young young students from all ages that are really enthusiastic about interviewing you and learning how to do this. ASI Food Pantry scholarships. We are guinea pigs for the physical therapy department down the first floor. So we go and test with them, and then they write papers on us and present them around the world. We work with the mentor program, and we also do ushering with the music and the theater department. And there we are in the physical therapy department getting a workout. And actually, there's a picture I got down below this room right here in Cardiovascular Western wellness program. So we got the first floor and the 3rd floor represented there in our pictures. Well, one of the things we're real conscious of as our members, based on their age, is about all the things that come with mobility and hearing and vision. And so one of the things that's been good is we're on Zoom right now, as that's made it a lot easier for people who had maybe stopped coming to campus because it was so difficult because of mobility to attend our classes. So, but in our classrooms, they just upgraded. I don't know how many of you know this, but during the pandemic, they've got federal grants of about $8.1 million, and they upgraded all the 450 classrooms on campus. So they all have quality equipment now that really helps with this accessibility issues.
Can you go back to the usher?
Yes.
How many people get to do that?
It depends on what they need in the way of volunteers. So I haven't actually done that. It's one of the things I haven't done, but I would say it's kind of a first come, first serve. So if you come and usher, you get a free admission to the theater department and music, whatever they're doing. And so I'd say we probably provide, depending on how many presentations you're doing, 30, 40, 50, probably ushers during a semester, something's in there. Yeah. Yeah. So benefits of membership, we have, I'll show you 10 subject areas, and I'm going to dive into these, but they generally kind of our subject areas are on, I'll show you in just a moment. This shows you what it was like pre-pandemic. We used to meet in our, the Sacramento Public Library in their classrooms and or in their community rooms at their libraries. That with the pandemic, they got shut down. What we did is we did a shift to Zoom. And so now we have classes on Zoom Monday through Thursday, and we're on campus Friday, sometimes on Saturdays, but on Fridays. So we've kind of done this the pandemic, what we call it, the pandemic pivot, you know, from classroom to Zoom, now back to Zoom and in classrooms. So what kind of seminars we offer? We offer things on art, photography, actual art, drawings, paintings, entertainment, you know, music, dancing, music, videos, all are real popular. Travel and adventure, a lot of our members travel, they come back and show their home movies. Quality has gone up in home movies from, I don't know if you remember, I grew up, you know, remember the slides? Now with the quality of your iPhone, you can get a lot better pictures, right? Language, we have people study French and Spanish. Literature, great books for people who are interested in those. All kinds of literature and great works. Science, I attend a class on Thursday mornings on Zoom. It's about engineering, and the guy's a retired civil engineer, and he has some great films on great projects, engineering projects around the world. Philosophy, for those who like to study their navel, there you go, you can do that. I've offended somebody who got a degree in philosophy, right? History, you know, that's one of the other very popular people in all kinds of subjects. We have classes and seminars. And then personal development, this is kind of where my niche comes into, but we've had classes on plant-based diets, meditation, yoga, studying the brain, all kinds of personal development classes. And then we have what we call birds of a feather affinity groups that get together, and everything from knitting and crocheting to yoga to singing to book clubs, all kinds of things of that type. So I'm going to show you a couple of seminars I do, and I go into great depth, but every spring I do one called Transitions. What will I do the rest of my life? This will be next spring will be my 8th semester doing this. I've been doing this kind of work for about 25 years as an avocation. We have 2 primary texts we use. One's called What Colors Your Parachute for Retirement by a gal named Nelson. It's not by Bowles. Bowles has got like a 6-page introduction, but it's by this guy Nelson working his PhD. And then the other one is a longevity prescription. This is kind of the Bible to the gerontology department. And this was by Robert Butler, who was a gerontologist at the University, Columbia University for like 50 years. So here's a lot of the topics we talk about: life stages, values, life's purpose, economics, geography, medicine, biology, psychology, sociology, your personal profile. And what those all go around is out of Nelson's book, he has this ideal retirement model. And in it, he has exercises in each one of those areas. So each week we have some reading and do some of those exercises and share what we have learned. I share some examples of people with personal stories. This is one of my former students who actually came to one of my classes. She lived in West Sacramento. Her whole story is that she decided she was going to move this intentional community into these tiny homes up in Walport, Oregon, right on the Pacific coast. And so changed her lifestyle. Not everybody's that radical, but it allowed her to be able to really get in touch with what was important to her in life. We also talk a lot about service and volunteering. And I go into great depth about this. I've been doing this kind of nonprofit work with volunteering for about 25 years, over 25 years. And so I bring in actually each Friday or in my class, the last 30 minutes, I have a different nonprofit leader come in and talk about their nonprofit organization where you can volunteer, about their vision, mission, program, services, and their need for volunteers. So here I have Melissa Leverett Clark, who's with volunteer coordinator with the hospice consortium and with Sutter Hospice that talks each spring. I have another woman, Jennifer Rubin, who talks about Stop Falls Sacramento, which is some workshops on how to prevent falls, and it's for seniors. and also Rebuilding Together, which is a nonprofit that helps refit homes, putting grab bars, ramps, and those kind of things, along with their other work. And then I do one I'm the CEO for the local affiliate for Habitat for Humanity. And later in my career, we used to go down to Nicaragua every year to build houses. So I talk a little bit about Nicaragua and about Habitat, let people know about that. So this is one of my mentees did this little slide for me called Find Your Purpose, Live Your Life. And that was her take on me, I think. So anyway, that's the gist of that one. Doing a new workshop this fall called Life's Purpose, Finding Joy and Happiness in the Next Chapter of Life. It's going to be 6 weeks long on Fridays from noon to 2:30. It's actually going to be down here on the first floor in Folsom Hall 1050 each Friday. And then here's kind of the topics you're going to talk about. The high happiness. I'm going to share a little bit about my Camino walk. I'm having a person come in and talk about her book, Transformations. We're talking about another book called The Good Life, which was written about Harvard and their 84-year study on a longitudinal study on living a good life and a long, meaningful life. And we'll talk about service and giving back, and then designing your own action plan. So this is the book we'll be using, called The How of Happiness by, I never can pronounce her last name, but Sonia, who's a PhD, a professor down in Southern California for over 30 years, and her specialty is positive psychology. So she's actually written a book. It's a very, very good book. That'll be a kind of her text. And then I'm going to tell you more about this slide, but I'm going to also, on one of the second class, I'm going to share a little bit of what I have today I'm sharing with you. And then on the third week, one of the people I'm going to have speaking is Donna Abatoni, which some of you may know. Donna, she was with Capital Public Radio for over 21 years. She was a morning host for like 15 years. And she wrote a book called Transformation about 10 years ago. And so she's been doing similar work on kind of life's purpose work in the last 20 years. So that's just a sampling what that workshop's going to be like. Shifting back to Renaissance overall, we have each Friday, we have a forum, and the forum has been going on since the very beginning in 1986. We have it in the fall and the spring. Each Friday afternoon from 3 to 4, we bring in really good speakers from all over California, Sacramento. This one actually was interesting last fall. We led off with Because Our Fathers Lied, a conversation. It was with Craig McNamara, the son of Robert McNamara. And Craig is a farmer, organic farmer, over 40 years over in Woodland. And he wrote this book about his father, who was Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War. So, and along with Larry Berman. So that's the kind of caliber of people we have. This is our catalog. Some of the covers are our catalog. We just actually posted this to our website on Monday. And so the fall catalog is out. It's got all the information about our seminars and, what they're about, biograph on the speakers. You can find that online. It's on a PDF format as well as a flipbook format. So check that out. Upcoming here, I'm going to hand out to you shortly here. We have a little yellow flyer that has this information. We have our semi-annual orientation and rendezvous coming up on Friday on the Friday, August the 18th. So a week from today. It's going to be over in the University Union. We'll have an orientation in Ballroom 3 from 10 to 11. And then we'll have our open house from 11 to 12:30. And in the open house, you're going to find people from all our program leaders will be presenting about their seminars. So you can come around and ask them about their seminars. And then we also have our community on and off post partners. So organizations that are good for our members, we have them there. And then we'll also have a Sac State, about a half-hour campus tour if people want to participate in that. So I invite you to come next Friday. There's no cost to that. You just parking is, if it's the cost of parking, but otherwise you can come and attend. I just had this slide in here to let you know one of the things we did I'm real proud of. I was president in 2021, 2022, 2020 to 2022. And one of the things we did is pandemic came along. And we were having a board meeting on the 9th of March of 2020, decided we had to shut things down, and we had a choice of either keeping the place open or shutting it down. So what we did is shifted to Zoom, and we're very proud to say we kept about 80% of our members, and that was because about 300 volunteers helped step up, help us make that shift. And so we found a lot of things about the Zoom that was good for our members. And this is just a laundry list of them, but there's not everybody likes Zoom, but for people, for people who've got mobility issues, as well as people who don't want to come over to campus all the time, you got classes Monday through Friday that you can take. So one of the things, if you ever have a group in your public, you want to have come and speak about the Renaissance Society, these are ambassadors like me today coming to talk to you. So we're glad to do that. We're big into social activities. You see here, one of the things, we actually have this coming up on we do this semi-annually. We have our social function, which is going to be on Sunday let me double check my date so I get it right, on the 17th of September. And it's going to be on Sunday afternoon. And so it's a way for our members to socially interact. And one of the things about aging well, as you'll find in that study, the Good Life from the Harvard study, was the number one issue, if you want to age well, is social interaction and relationships. If you want to die early and die badly, stay at home by yourself and like in a cave, okay? That's a little abrupt, isn't it? But I'm the same age you all are. So social interaction is very, very important. This shows you where we had members during Zoom, people all across the United States. We actually had somebody who's a member in Paris. And this just shows you how our membership fell off a little bit, and we're building it back up again. And here are the key dates coming up. Our membership portal is open. Our catalog has been posted. Our enrollment will start next Monday on the 14th, and our orientation and rendezvous is a week from today. And our programs will be starting on September 5th, and all that is on that flyer I will give you.
And did you talk about money? There's a cost, but it's just a one-time.
Yeah, so good question. The sort of cost, people always ask that. It's $100 a year for as many programs as you want to take. People join mid-year at $60. Parking for Friday and Saturday is $40, which is, if you look at the prices for parking on campus, that's a really good deal, right? And if you want a library card, it's $10. So really good prices on all those things. So any questions? I've been rolling along, trying to get through that quickly so we move on to other things. Any questions about the Renaissance Society? Anybody has? All right, let me see if I can shift over here. And okay, let me go in here and share my other screen. And all right. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Camino de Santiago to Frances. And the significance of this slide, the reason I put it in here is I told you I've been doing this mentoring with students for the last 7 going on 8 years. And my student in the spring was a very active listener. She was very quiet, but at the end they have this celebration event to thank the mentors for coming out, talking to them. And so they try to sum you up in 6 words. And so my 6 words was be whoever you want to be. My mother used to say that to me when I was growing up. There's a long story to that, but she captured, remembered it. And then I realized the picture behind it she had captured was me walking the Camino. And so this was a Monday night on the 15th of May. The next day I left for Spain. So talk about synchronicity of the chances of something like this. And so when I shared this with the class, all these students broke out in applause, and a woman came up afterwards and said she was one of our members who'd walked the Camino twice. So that was a great send-off for me. So here's a picture of, actually in the center is in the center is a picture of the cathedral at in Santiago de Compostela, over 1,000 years old. The left is a book, and I have a copy of it here, which is kind of the Bible of your walking Camino, the Frances. And you can look at it when you see up here. Mine's a little dog-eared, you got a little wet. And then on the right is the film The Way. How many of you have seen the film The Way? Anybody here? Nobody. Great film written, a drama written by Emilio Estevez and starring Martin Sheen. And it's still available. It just came out. It's been made about.
It's his dad, right?
Yeah, it's his dad. Absolutely. And his dad, Martin Sheen, is originally from Spain. And came to the United States. He was born here in the United States. So these are all the different routes. And if you look up there, there's all these routes are all the Caminos, but the one I took was the Camino de Frances, which starts over here in Saint Jean Pied de Port and goes along in green there to Santiago de Compostela. On the Camino, I would always ask people, where are you from? People I physically met, I met people from 43 different countries on the Camino. So you can't read all those, but from all over the world. South America, Asia, Middle East, Europe, you name it. I also met people from 38 US states. And I'm sure there were more from those other countries and states. I heard about them, but I only put down the ones I actually met. People of all occupations. Now, this is a little busy and hard to read, but anything you could think of. I kind of was a magnet for people who've been in the military, met a lot of them. Met a guy who booked Broadway shows, met a guy who retired 30 years in the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. I didn't ask any more questions. I just left it at that, right? A guy who was a London cabbie for 45 years, just a little bit of everything. People.
Each night, did you write down everybody you had met for that day?
I have a journal that I kept, and not everybody. That's just me. I found that's the way I've lived my life. And so that's the way I kind of got to know people. I like their stories, got a ton of stories. I'm only going to share a few of them with you today, but it was amazing the stories I heard on Camino. These are the different ways people walk. They walk in families, walk husband and wives. The one here on the that you see here with the kids, the students, this was a group of students from Madrid, a private Catholic school. They were ninth graders, 15, 16 years old, had chaperones along. There were 54 of them. They were walking the last 100 kilometers of the Camino from Sarria. And, they're entitled to the certificates you'll see up here because they walked that 100 kilometers. And this had become a tradition. There were chaperones who were walking who had done this 25 years ago. And then you see there's actually people who ride horses. Because they leave treats for you as you walk down the trail. You have to watch out for them, right? So, Spain is beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And I would take lots of photos of anything. I wish I'd taken more photos. I used to I had WhatsApp on my phone, a free app, and I used to talk to my wife every night. And so I would pan around with the photo if the Wi-Fi was good so she could see the photos. And this shows you just the different terrain. These poppies here, these poppy fields, red poppy fields that were just beautiful. Churches, every little town had a church. So this is how my journey began. I actually saw the film probably 12, 13 years ago, The Way. Then I met a guy named Fred Best, who's a Renaissance member who had walked it about 10 years ago, 2013. And he was writing a book, and I'd seen him in Panera, and he was always editing the book. And then I met another woman last December, this Barbara Horton that you see up here, and she was the membership chair for Friendship Force. And so she mentioned just as we were having a Christmas holiday dinner that she'd walked. So I was getting these little signals that I was supposed to walk the Camino. And ultimately, I was told when I was REI about this group, the Sacramento Pilgrims. And I started going to their monthly meetings. So these are people who either had walked Camino, one of the routes, or were getting ready to walk. And this is actually an event. If you look over here, the guy who's kind of rotund over here, that's me. They were having a shell ceremony where they were handing out this shell, which is symbolic of the Camino, and had a little ceremony that evening. We were answering questions. And then along the way, I met this guy, Frank Cabrera. Frank was at one of the first walks. He had monthly walks. Came up to me, started chatting me up, and we started talking. He's become kind of my mentor on the Camino. The whole time I was walking, he was walking up north on the northern route, and was having a hard time of it. And we would kind of keep each other cheered up along the way. And then on the right is Walter Wilson, who was my good friend of mine, who actually took me to San Francisco, drove me down, and picked me back up. So he acted as my Camino support team there. So they talk about there's the physical, the mental, and the spiritual aspect of the Camino. And I'm going to talk to those just briefly. The physical side is sometimes we don't listen as men, right? So my wife said to me early on, she had had a friend of a friend that walked Camino, and she learned about how you could transport your pack ahead, right? And she said, "You're going to do that, aren't you?" Nothing. And I said, "We'll see." So I went to my chiropractor this is him on the on the left-hand side here, Derek Daniloff, who's been my chiropractor for 25 years. I torqued my back. This is 5 days before I left. He muscle tested me. He says, "You couldn't walk a mile right now." He worked on me. He said, we got you to 6. He said, "Come back next Monday." This is the day before I left. He got me up to about 12, 15 miles. The problem was I carried too heavy a pack. People told me not to do this, but I carried a pack that was 30 pounds. And so I ended up looking like this. That tilt is how I was thrown out of cattywampus, right? And I actually had a friend later from Florida who had tagged me as Sacramento sideways because of the way I walked down the hills. So I got over the Pyrenees painfully the first 2 days and got on the other side. I WhatsApped my wife and she says, I said, "I have seen and I am transporting my pack now." And so from there, I started transporting my pack and he's sending it forward to the little tag with a transport company. I had this magnetic pad, a way or a Nikon pad for my back, uses anti-inflammatory cream on my back, took ibuprofen, got a massage along the way. Those are my shoes. They're up here before and after. And then this is me laying. I would stop about every 2 hours and I would lay on my back to stretch it out, right? People thought I was sleeping. I never slept once in that whole time, right? But it was simply for me to stretch my back. So what is the first lesson learned in the Camino? Is listen to your wife, okay? Now, this is a perennial, okay, but sometimes men have to learn it over and over. I have personally had to learn it over and over, right? The other one at the bottom you'll see is their walk your own Camino. And you'll hear this like a mantra. There are no rules in the Camino. However you want to walk the Camino is your way to walk the Camino. No judgment attached. So I felt no pain and I transported my pack and I felt good about it. So walking the Camino, this is me before and after. This guy who looks like he's about ready. The first man to deliver a child right here. That's me. This is me afterwards. You can see I walked 779 kilometers, 480 miles in 38 days from May 19th to June 25th. I was averaging about 20 to 25 kilometers a day, about 12 to 15 miles. I estimated on my phone, I did over 1 million steps, about 1,300,000 steps. And I lost weight-wise, probably in the neighborhood of 35 to 40 pounds, 10, 12 pounds before, and another 23 or 22, 23 on as minimum Camino. This up here is my doctor, Dr. Huang. After I got back, 4 weeks after I got back, I had my physical. All my numbers were down. Cholesterol was down. Blood sugar was down. Weight was down. Dr. Huang, this is Dr. Huang smiling. That's his smile right there. He's a happy camper because I did that. So how far is 480 miles? Well, Mr. Google told me that when I went into the computer, that 480 miles is basically Sacramento from about to Encinitas, California, which is about 40 miles north of Tijuana. So if you want to know how far about 480 miles is, that's what it is. That'd be like walking from here to almost the Mexican border. You should have a mental checkup too for this. Okay. So I got some aliases along the way. These are some of the names people would call me. Even one young set of Catholic girls called me Gandalf because of my great. And then a guy towards the end told me, he was this guy right here, Matas, was from Israel. He said, "Do you know what in Hebrew, what Ken means?" I said, "I don't know." He says, "Yes." I said, "You're telling me I'm a yes man?" I said, No. Okay. So mental journey. Okay. The best way I can describe this for me is, you start walking by yourself a lot and your mind starts going like, well, if I go, what's the next albergue, the next hostel I'm going to stay at? We're going to be able to find a bed. Will my backpack get there? Will I get a lower bunk so I don't have to climb up the bunk bed? Will I have enough euros? Will the ATM machine take my card? Will I be able to complete my, all this kind of mental stuff going on, right? Finally, your head kind of settles up, and I finally came to the solution. A buddy of mine asked me, he said, "Did you ever think about quitting the Camino?" And I really didn't answer him at the time when I was telling him about this. And I realized I like to think I'm not a quitter, I also like to think I'm a problem solver. So what I did is I looked at ways I could solve all these problems. And I asked for assistance along the way. One guy told me, hey, he said, if you get a top bunk, just move the mattress to the floor and move it back the next morning. They won't even know you did it because they're down in the office, right? I said, okay. To take Camino one day at a time. And I realized the reason I was walking this was about people. It wasn't about certificates or, you know, credentials. And that's one of the things you get to do is you walk along every place you stay, you get a stamp, right? And the stamp is showing that you were walked Camino. You just didn't drive from France, from the Pyrenees to Santiago, right? But I realized this was really about the people I met along the way and their stories. And so from the spiritual standpoint, people would ask me the question, they'd say, okay, is your wife going with you? No. Are you going with a group? No. What are your expectations? I have no expectations. I just showing up, seeing what happens. And why you walk the Camino? And the best answer I could give people was, if I told you my life story, I've reinvented myself a whole bunch of times. I've walked all three. I've been military. I was in the nonprofit sector. I was in business, self-employed. I've had 18 or 20 jobs. I'm used to reinventing myself. I've been retired for 7 years. So this was one way for me to kind of reinvent myself once again. And it also was a way for me to kind of capture part of my planning for my seminar this fall. And so somebody told me, I said, well, you're kind of on a field trip, right? A research project. I said, yeah, I guess that's right. And then Shari Lowen, who was on here, said, well, you're walking your talk. I like that. That's a good quote. Okay. And another young gal said, when I told her about the things I'd done in life, she says, like you've lived many lives. I go like, yeah, I guess, so that's kind of my best take on the spiritual side of why I was there. So a lot of beautiful places. Up here is a cathedral or Burgos. I didn't even see this. I walked into the rain in Burgos for 3 hours, hailed. I was just glad to get to bed. The next morning, a Sunday morning, I walked out of this portal, and here it was this 1,000-year-old church up there. It's like filled the screen, right? This picture here is of storks. Up in these torches, they build these nests, and you really have to see these storks are huge, right? And they don't mess with them, leave them up there, right? So anytime you got one of these churches out, you see these storks up there. That's an 800-year-old chestnut tree, and that's the 100-kilometer mark to Santiago. So that was kind of like, you're 679 down, right? It's getting close, right? And then this one here is a guy who's an artist, and he built this art gallery out in the middle of nowhere, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful art. So all kinds of things you saw. One of the things people talk about is their pilgrim family. There's typically, depending on the pace you walk, there's some people will be way behind you. There'll be other people that you shoot forward and you never see again. But there's another group of people you tend to walk about the same pace. So they may be a day ahead of you, a day behind you, but they catch up back and forth. And so these are some of the folks that I met, and they're from all over the world: France, Spain, Germany, United States, South America, and every one of them had a very, very interesting story. And it's got to know them and friendships along the way.
You walk every day?
I walked every day, and the reason I walked 38 days. The stages in the book say it takes 33 if you stay on those stages, but I got behind because of my back, so I didn't have an option. It was kind of like I gotta walk every day. And so some days I walked half the distance in the beginning, but I walked every day. Yeah. And then people always ask, you say, well, why do people walk the Camino? Everybody has their own reason. Some people have religious reasons. And it's not like I thought, well, everybody walking Camino is Catholic. No, not so. And not everybody's there is particularly religious or spiritual. Some are there at transition points in their life. Some have lost a loved one. Some are commemorating a special event in their life. Some don't know why they're walking. They really don't. And they're trying to figure it out while they're walking. But you don't walk. Some people walk for the fun of it, but I think that's kind of a minority group. Okay. You don't go out and just decide to go on and walk 500 miles, right? So one of the things I found interesting about the Camino is it was something like someplace between a confessional and a 12-step program, an AA meeting. Because people, when you ask them who they were or where they were from, they give you their first name. They never gave their last names. And it wasn't because they want to be anonymous, but you meet so many people, right? It's kind of like you're good to remember maybe who they are or where they're from, right? But what I found was I would ask them, where are you from? What's your name? Where are you from? Why you walk Camino? Their life story. It was amazing what people would share with you along the way. And because I think there was a reason they were there. There's kind of like this environment you were in, how candid people would be about their lives. So these are people I saw in the beginning and saw in the end and didn't see until the very end. This guy up here, I'm about 2/3 of the way to the Camino. It's kind of hard to see him. His name is Francois. I look at him. I never forget faces. And I said, I know you. And he's just looking at a young guy. Like, I said, you were sitting to the right of me in St. Jean Pied de Port the day before I left. You were smoking a cigarette and drinking a cup of coffee. The kid was amazed that I remembered who he was, right? This gal, I saw her on the first day I was walking. She was 68 years old. She was an accountant from New Jersey. She was having a hell of a time walk just like I did, but she had been booked, had a booking agency. She was booked all the way to Roncesvalles. She had another 17 kilometers to go that day. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We were having lunch. And I always wondered where she went to, right? Did she make it? Did she turn around? I'm sitting in a little restaurant or a little bar one day having something to eat for lunch. I hear this voice saying, Ken, how'd you get ahead of me? And I turn around and she's there. And I said, well, have a seat, have some water. I said, I need a newspaper. I need to have proof of life because I wondered if you survived. She made it all that way that day to Roncesvalles over the Pyrenees. He got in at 9:30 at night in the dark. I was amazed. She had a lot of toughness to her. So I ran into a lot of military veterans. I was like a magnet on that. I met from all the different services, Air Force, French, Spanish paratrooper. The guy done 800 parachute jumps, some were in for 3 years. Some were in, the Spanish fighter pilot was in for 46 years, right? So, but we had lots of stories to share. A lot of people over 70 years old. Now you see up here, I put this disclaimer. I didn't ask women their age. My wife taught me better than do something that stupid, right? Okay. But most of the men would tell me, this is the oldest guy I met. He was a German. He was 84 years old. This is his fourth time walking Camino. Carried a big camera. He would walk half distances. So he was laying in a field one day, taking a nap. And somebody said to him, trying to get him in conversation, he said, I'm a German civil servant. We sleep in the afternoon. Thank you. This guy over here was his name is Danny. He was a London cabbie for 45 years. And he told me about what do they call it? He called the knowledge. In order to be a cabbie, you may have heard this story before in London, you have to know the routes, the map, right? He said it took him 18 months to do that. He said nowadays it takes 4 years. And then you sit in front of a board of cabbies and they grill you to see if you really know your way around London. Right? And so he was 79 years old. He'll be 80 in December. He'd walked a portion of the Camino before. He was walking because he had lost his wife. He was her caregiver prior to the Camino. She had a brain tumor. She lived for about 18 months. He was going to walk Camino. He had back problems. He walked the last 100 kilometers with his son. Went to the mass, the Pilgrim's Mass in Santiago on her anniversary. And he came back and said, now I'm walking the whole thing. So he transported his pack, went the whole 800 kilometers, and he was always ahead of me, right? And so anyway, all kinds of folks from all kinds of backgrounds.
And this is public land or national parks, or what is it? How is it open? You sleep out there in the field?
Yeah, but no, you can't sleep in the field. No. There's a law in Spain that you can't camp out unless it's a designated camp. You'll get arrested for it. You'll get fined. But this is a this is a world historic site. I forget what year it was designated, but the Spanish government has something where that land is, they don't necessarily own it, but they have a right to it. So they keep it up and they maintain the trail the whole way. So you'll find guys out there weed whacking the weeds. You'll find that it's really well kept up, so it's safe for people to walk and transport. So the government kind of controls it that way. I just simply noticed in here, these albergues is what you call the hostels. And the folks you see up here are the managers. And these were all very helpful people to me. I mean, I don't speak any Spanish, so I'd go to them with my phone and I'd say, could you help me book my room for tomorrow night? And so they dial it up and they would make sure I had a reservation the next time, or make sure my bag was going to be transferred.
That's what each day you booked a place for the next night. So you knew you had to walk.
I did for the first 3 or 4 days, and I didn't, but towards the end I did because it gets busier. Yeah. So I'd book a day. Towards the end, I booked 2 days in advance because I didn't want to. I almost ended up one night without a place to stay. Something told me I needed to do it. And I ended up staying in a hotel because there was no other rooms in that town. Yeah.
So at least when you did that, then you knew you had to walk that far because you had to get to where.
Yeah. That's where my bag was. Yeah. So these are what I call, we refer to them as Camino angels. And these are people who did little things, just without being asked. This young guy, I'm coming down to the Pyrenees. I'm sitting on the side, trying to figure out how the hell I was going to get down. And he comes over. I was trying to get up. He reached down, pulled me up. These are a couple of good Samaritans. These are people of Christian faith. They had this food truck out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was like a food desert out there, and they operated this thing. This is a group of husbands and wives. They were out walking Camino, and they were sitting down and having oranges and wafers. And I was over there laid on my back, and they were feeding me oranges and wafers, right? This young Italian guy here has had some extra food and some pasta. It was delicious. And so he gave a plate to Kurosawa and myself. And this guy here was from Maryland. She was a physician's assistant. She had drugs with her. She gave me some ibuprofen when I ran out, right? She was my drug dealer. So, and then over here, you barely see this gal over here. These 2 women were both retired Navy. The one on the left was 26 years, Navy woman, naval officer. The one on the right was 36 years, retired naval officers. They both lived up in Seattle. They were on the cutting edge. They were some of the first people out on ships, right? Both had health issues. She'd had cancer, breast cancer, and a year before. I was walking over the Pyrenees. And when I was walking the first day on the Pyrenees, a young Brazilian gal, an Argentina gal, offered to carry my pack. She was in her 20s. I said, no, I can't let you do that. The second day, Mary Lee there, 57 years old, so breast cancer survivor, she offered to carry my pack. I said, no, thank you. Later, they come rolling up here on these bikes they'd rented for a week. And I said, Mary Lee, I want to tell you how much I appreciated that offer. I said, my male ego would not allow me to have you carry my pack. But I said, I have healed that now. So if you want to carry my pack anytime, you're more than welcome to do it, right? They get a laugh out of that. But just the nicest people you ever met. So those are Camino angels. I could tell you stories all day. Youth. There are a lot of youth that quit their jobs and, trying to figure out what they want to do in their lives, right? This kid over here, Trevor, he and I were one-on-one, and people walked up. So what's your story? Turned out he was a University of Oklahoma sports management graduate, 2016. He'd done an internship and got a job with the Kansas City Chiefs and been there 6 or 7 years. I said, when are you getting your ring? They just won the Super Bowl this year, right? He said, 2 weeks. And I said, how much is that thing worth? He said, I'm not going to be there to receive it because I'm walking here. He says, he showed me a picture of one from the year before. He said that one was over $14,000. So he was getting ready to get his Super Bowl ring because everybody, it's not just the players, the coaches, all the staff get those. And then this gal had taken a year off from medical school in Scotland. I give her a hard time about it, but she was trying to figure out if she really wanted to be a doctor or not. So here's a woman on the left here who was from Melbourne, a social worker. She was her 30th anniversary. Her husband was back in Australia. They talked every night, and she was really happy about their 30th anniversary. This couple here was from Milan, Italy. It's Marco and Margareta. He was an IT engineer. She was a palliative nurse, like a hospice nurse in Milan. And so it turned out they've been married on the 10th of June. And I said to him, I said, so do I need to explain the concept of a honeymoon to you? And they laughed, said, no, we understand. I said, oh, okay, good. And then somebody else asked, said, so do you think maybe it might have been a better idea to walk the Camino before you got married than after you got married? And he said, you're not the first one to say that to me. So this was one, talk about synchronicity. The woman on the left, she didn't really want to talk to me first. We were out walking alone. Finally, I said some things. She started really opening up to me. She lives in Seattle. Turned out that she was a lesbian. She'd come out during her in midlife and just shared a whole bunch of kilometers were just rolling by. That's the good thing about talking is that time just flies by and you're walking, right? So that was in the afternoon. We had a great conversation. I don't think I ever saw her again. The next morning, I'd met this guy once before, and I knew, he'd been a Marine for 6 years. He was minister for 30 years, 20 years. And so we were having breakfast. We were there for 5-10 minutes. And turned out the reason he was walking Camino is he knew he was in a branch or the Presbyterian Church, very conservative Dutch farmers that came over from Holland. And they were talking about the whole LGBTQ issue and talking about getting more conservative on that. And in his heart, he knew that wasn't right. He didn't agree with it. And he knew he was going to have to go to the board and there's going to be a schism in the church, lose members and all. But it was a night of the soul for him to kind of focus on his things that were coming up for him. So the idea that I talked to one person, that's the only openly gay person that I talked to that shared that with me. And the next morning I'm having this conversation with a pastor about what's going on in his life. Health issues. Oh my God. People who were surviving health issues. This guy was still taking treatments on the Camino. She'd have stopped every 2-3 days. She had some immunology thing. She would give herself her treatments. She was sicker than a dog out there, but she was still walking. This guy was a cancer survivor. Yeah. This guy, Jonathan. So I'm walking up this hill one day. I'm going this way. He's coming this way because people do opposite routes, go the other way. And I said, where are you from? He paused. He says, I'm from a little town outside of Corpus Christi, Texas. I said, oh. I said, why are you walking the Camino? He pulls out his phone. He holds it sideways. He shows this picture of him laying in a hospital bed. And he's got tubes running out of his nose. He's comatose. He said, I weighed 350 pounds. He said, I clinically died of alcohol poisoning. He said, I was drinking 30 beers a day. I didn't know you could drink 30 beers a day, right? So anyway, he went from 350 pounds, this picture, to 148 pounds. He had started working out. Somebody said he traded one addiction for another, but he showed me these buff pictures. He was really into physique. He'd already walked up Portugal to Santiago. He was headed to where I'd come from, to the Pyrenees. Then he was going to go up into France and Spain. He was going to hike. And he was going to go to Thailand to do Muay Thai boxing there, martial arts. And I was just amazed by this guy. I didn't know what to say. And, I think in between, we only talked for less than 10 minutes. Kind of subtext here would be, the doctor probably told him you died once. They can't bring you back again. This is a one-time deal. And then the guy realized he was addicted, right? And he had to change his lifestyle. He wanted to live. And so now he was changing his life, right? And so those are the kind of stories. I just run into these all the time. But he'd found his way and he was walking his way to find his answers. Number of people grieving the death of a lost one, loved one. Danny already told you about the woman here, had lost her husband to pancreatic cancer. Once they knew he had it, he lived for 18 months. They both quit their jobs, spent time together. These two kids here are her kids. They came out. She walked the whole way from the Pyrenees. They came out to walk the last 100 kilometers. They came up from Australia. Her daughter's 25. Her son was 22, finishing up his last year in college. So she was very open, telling me all this stuff. This guy here, his name is Gert. He was in Stuttgart, Germany. And Gert had we were sitting one night, I was by myself, I motioned this, I never met him before, he came, sat down with me, my friend who's a psychologist sitting next to us. I said, why you walk the Camino? He got real pained look on his face, and he says, a difficult subject. He says, my daughter died when she was 49 years old. And so he showed me her picture on his phone. And so a couple days later, we had breakfast, and this friend of mine who's a psychologist from Brazil was sitting there, and he went outside, and she got a little stone when she was in this place in Osabero. Went to a couple of masses, got the stone from a Franciscan priest, had a little yellow arrow on it. He said the arrow means love. She really cherished that stone, but she gave it to him that morning after breakfast. And you could see like a weight lift off him, right? And so you saw these kind of healings from people, right, along the way. This is one guy who said he was walking religious reasons, right? And he was actually walking, he was a U.S. Army veteran. He was walking, raising funds for his parish. So he collected, his wife would send prayers from the congregation, and he would do prayers along the way in the churches every day. And he collected about $3,000 for his parish. And this is my friend, the psychologist. She was stopping every church along the way. She had this thing against the church, and she had this awakening. She'd never been to she'd never taken communion, and she'd never done confession before, and she did that, and she then great burden was lifted off her.
Did you know her before this trip?
I did not. I walked with her for about 5-6 days, the longest I walked with anybody, and it was the most amazing. She had traveled all around the world. She'd taken a year off, was traveling all these sacred sites around the world. So I'll show you one more of the story, I think, of a person here. This guy right here, his name was Jose. Jose came in one night. We had this little room, two bedroom, really nice place. And I said, what do you do? And he said, well, I'm retired Spanish Air Force fighter pilot. And he was in for 46 years. And he said, I was diagnosed in 2012 with tongue cancer. They operated. They got the cancer. The doctor came back, did a biopsy. He came back 3 days later and said, we think we got it all. No radiation, no chemotherapy. We're just gonna have to get checked twice a year. So he started walking the Camino de Frances every year, 3 times a year, starting in 2012. This was his 50th Camino. And so the only thing I can think is it was for him, it was a way of life, a way of saying thank you, because he was alive. A lot of things saw along the way here. I'm going to move forward. Lots of ceremonies I went to. This is a guy I ran into. His name was Lynn. He was from Nova Scotia. His second time walking the Camino. He was actually carrying his brother's ashes. His brother had walked the Camino. And so he had run into this young gal. He was a pilot, I think, military pilot. And he was describing to her, he says, I have more years behind me than I have ahead of me. And she says, get a smaller plane. And I go like, what does that mean? I'm still pondering what a smaller plane means to me. But in his metaphor for life, it was get a smaller plane for the remaining years you have on your smaller runway, right? Think about that.
Easier to fly,
Well, I've written in my journal a lot about this, but I think some people give me answers to that immediately off the top of their head. Others kind of sit there going like, I'm going to have to think about that. Right? Now, here's one of my last. This guy, so I arrived in Santiago de Compostela on the 25th of June on a Sunday. Went to this albergue. I said, I have this down now. I'm 71 years old. I have a bad back. Do you have a lower bunk for me? I get really, I almost get teary-eyed when I'd say it, right? And the gal says, she'd heard this 100 times, 1,000 times, right? She says, I got one up in the 3rd floor. I said, fine. So I go up there, and as I'm up there, I meet this guy. And I said, where are you from? He says, well, I'm originally from southern India. Now I live in Switzerland. I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a priest. I've been a priest for 15 years. So I joked with him. I said, so are you going to lead the service, the Pilgrim's Mass tomorrow on Monday? He said, no, my Spanish isn't that good. So the next morning, I go to the Pilgrim's Mass at noon. All the priests, the head priest, and like 10 or 8 or 10 of them would walk up there, right? And who do I see? His name is Jackson James, right? And there he was, actually doing the communion. He didn't do this thing, but he did the communion that day. And I saw him the next morning. I shared this picture that I'd taken as he served communion facing my way. To me, there's a thing where they swing this big incense thing you see in all the films. They didn't do that day. This meant more to me, the fact that I met this priest, right? A real priest to help conduct the service, right? On the way back, I met this guy, Scott Williams, in the Barcelona airport. I had seen him online talking about taking care of your feet on the Camino. And I looked at him, I said, I know you. I know you. I said, the YouTube video. And so he said, yeah, the guy's a through hiker. He's walked all the big three, the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Coast Trail, the one up the Rockies, each one of them over 2,000 miles. And so kind of synchronicity running into these people. So winding down here, what did I learn on Camino? People always ask me, these are the things I've come up with, the value of people and relationships. For me, everybody gets their own thing, but for me, it was hearing people's stories about their lives. And it made me, in the diversity of the people I met, and humanity, I saw all these people that have been through a lot of rough stuff in their life and they were still standing, right? And that every one of us is a unique individual with their own unique story. I've believed that for years. I just want to know what their unique story is, right? And then gratitude and appreciation. I'm in a process right now writing a letter to my wife. It's becoming kind of a long letter, but we've been married for, it'll be 33 years next month. And, I had a lot of time to think about how much I'd appreciated her and the positive impact she's had on my life. This is a second marriage for both of us. And my life is dramatically different because of the impact she's had. So I'm also trying to figure out what my smaller plane is. And these are the things I'm kind of focusing on now. Maintaining my health. I lost 35, 40 pounds. I don't want to gain it back. I'm looking at this formula here of thinking about what my passions are, knowing what my talents and my strengths are, looking at places I can serve to be on purpose. And then I'm looking next year at walking Camino in Portugal once again.
So you want to do it again?
Yeah, my buddy keeps asking me, where are you going to do this again? At the time, I say it's kind of like childbirth, for a woman. I think, if you're having the child, it's probably not the time to ask them if they want to have another child. Once it's over, the longer it is, you remember the good things. And so the question you always have people say is, is the Camino calling you, and there's the mental, the physical, the spiritual side of this. I say get more information. There's a local organization called the Sacramento Pilgrims Community. They meet monthly for meetings where they have presentations on the Camino, all the different routes. So people tell their stories of having walked. And they also have walks along the river once a month. And that's where I'm in that picture someplace here. So, I encourage people, go and get more information and see if it's something you want to do. And there was a great talk on Rick Steves' show, and this is my last slide. He did an interview with Martin Sheen and Amelia Estevez, Martin Sheen's son. And Estevez was the producer, the writer, producer, and director of this film. And they asked this question of, Rick Steves says, can you walk a pilgrimage without going to Spain? He kind of sets it up, not everybody can physically do it, financially, whatever time, whatever they get off. And he basically says what I've got written up here, and he does it a lot better when he's saying it, but he basically says, if you have compassion for yourself, it will extend itself into someone else. Sometimes our pilgrimage just across the street to witness the need or to express a measure of compassion for someone else. That's what opens us up. That's what cracks our hearts open. Pilgrims can be a few yards, a few meters. It's the thought process where the heart leads us. It's that instinct that we so often ignore because of fear or can't be bothered, not the time. There are those moments when we cross the street and we've never been able to go home the same. So something you think about as far as whether you want to walk a Camino or a pilgrimage, right? Whether it's going to Spain or France or Portugal or right here at home, you can walk your own pilgrimage. So I know I've gone on for a long time here. Do you have any questions anymore? I hope you enjoyed that. I tried to capture the heart of what, was for me. Everybody's got a different story, what I got out of it isn't what the next person gets out of it, right? But everybody walks away different, change, I think, because of the experience they had, so. Thank you for listening.
Any questions out there?